Well, welcome in LSU fans, and things are feeling pretty good if you're a fan of the LSU Tigers baseball team. 3-0 to start the regular season, an opening weekend sweep of the Purdue Fort Wayne Mastodons. Glenn, I don't know when we're going to say that name again, but now that you and I know that team, we will excel at trivia night somewhere in the Baton Rouge area with that name at least.
Yeah, so the mustard yellow kind of
Oh,
jerseys that they were displaying here, Dijon mustard, whatever you want to call it.
yes.
It was not an elite matchup in terms of jerseys on that side of things. LSU, of course, wore their classic golds here on Sunday. They had the pinstripes on Saturday, so like LSU's fine. Like their classic jerseys, like just keep it
Yeah.
where it is. No need to tinker like Mr. Texas A&M over there and College Station. Those were, I don't know if people have seen those, but
Practice
not
jerseys.
not their best, not their best effort, I don't think. But look, I thought that this was a great first three games of the season to kind of get their feet wet in a lot of different areas. You know, they weren't really challenged much in any of these three games,
Mhm.
and they kind of handled their business the way that they were supposed to. And we'll dive into some more of the particulars here, but overall, I thought it was a real good first three games for a lot of people, and we're going to continue to bounce off of this. We're going to talk a lot about the pitching today because if I had told you going into the weekend that LSU would only walk two or three guys. I mean, they did not walk many people at all on the pitching side, and that Zach Cohen, Connor Ware, Gavin Guidry would not see any time on the mound this weekend.
Yeah.
And that LSU would hold them down to 2 runs on the weekend. I wouldn't have believed you. Like I thought that all three of those guys would be arms that they used in this opening weekend series, and instead they leaned heavily on their starters that did tremendous work between Kate Anderson, Anthony Ianson, and Chase Shores. And then what really blew me away was the freshman pitching here, which we can touch on a little bit more. But they used all four of their freshmen, and all four of them looked the part of just absolute studs. So
Yeah.
wherever you want to start this, I know I kind of geared us towards the pitching
Yeah.
here. I think that's a good place to start. Like, because a lot of this will play. Like, I mean, no matter
Yeah.
if you're playing Purdue, Fort Wayne, or you're playing Ole Miss, or they don't even play Ole Miss this year. Why did I pick Ole Miss? Or you're playing Tennessee.
A&M.
You're
Yeah,
playing
Tennessee.
Tennessee at home here later this spring. Uh, a lot of what they did here on the mound, I think, will translate well
Yeah.
for LSU if they're able to continue doing it.
Yeah, so let's start with it. And you wrote kind of a piece on aired on not aired. I'm in podcast mode that
We're all over the
published
place.
published on Saturday morning about Kate Anderson. And look, I think you and I both were kind of thinking maybe hesitantly like this could be a dude. And obviously, look, one Friday start against a team that I would have bet that a lot of people never even heard of before they came to Baton Rouge. It doesn't mean that he's going to be the most touted pitcher in 2025. But Cade Anderson and Glenn, I wanted you to expound upon this. He looked the part. Uh, when there was adversity, this guy just stayed calm, cool, collected, which you could kind of say about the entire pitching staff this weekend. But without getting too much into what you wrote about, why is it not too early to get excited about Cade Anderson in 2025?
Yeah, I used the word ace, and a couple of our board members kind of hopped on me
Whoa.
after one game, calling him an ace and all that stuff. And I think what I meant more so on the fact that I called him an ace was his demeanor and his approach to the game, his approach on the mound. It just seems like nothing's going to phase him at all this season. I mean, he could, give up a couple of hits. He could put guys on base. He could put guys on second and third, which he did
Yeah.
at one point in this game on Friday night or Friday afternoon, I should say. And then he can work around it. Like he put two guys on second and third, and I think he struck out a couple guys and was able to get out of that jam. And that was really the only pressure that he faced, and he was able to get out with no runs allowed on Friday and did a really nice job of just mixing his pitches. He
Mhm.
has a fastball that goes 93, 94, but he really mixes it in with a killer slider that he's worked on
Yeah.
really all off season. And that's whether you're facing it from the left side or the right side, just the pitch placement, and I think Coach Johnson calls it pitchability of where he puts that ball. Makes it extremely difficult on hitters, and I think probably the whole crux of that piece that I wrote on Saturday was just to get people to understand that like he thinks in a way that you want to start off weekends with. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
you want a guy that's going to go out there and have a steady heart rate from the very jump. You want a guy that's going to have a calm demeanor on the mound, no matter what's thrown at him. And he has that. And he talked about, Luke Holman being a great example of that from last year. And Jay Johnson was very much in agree of how those two carry themselves on the mound and how they approach everything and in their preparation. So it was really, ecstatic to see that from Anderson. 8 strikeouts. He goes 5 innings. Didn't really look like he broke much of a sweat in that time on the mound. So a good first start. Again, it's Purdue Fort Wayne, and we got to take some of this with a grain of salt considering the competition. But I think from a pitching side, more so than anything else, you can really see that this stuff will play, like we mentioned, against some of the better teams in the SEC if they can continue to kind of hone in on some of that stuff pitching wise.
And like you're saying, Glenn, I mean, this isn't – I know that there's only been one outing against a team in a different uniform, but we've seen him do this kind of all winter, a little bit in the fall, where he's just comfortable. And even dating back to Chapel Hill Regional, I mean, this is a guy who just really matured a lot. And I think you're seeing not just the physical side, but the mental side of the game, like you've kind of alluded to, is really there. If you haven't already, check out Glenn's piece on that, kind of detailing Cade Anderson's mental side. Because even talking with him for the podcast interview we did a couple weeks ago, it's just I think he's going to turn out to be, and here's my, I guess, hot take. I think he's going to turn out to be one of those guys that you don't, if you meet him, like if you're, this is not a plug, but if you're at Canes and you see him in line in front of him, you wouldn't just think, hey, that's the ace of LSU staff with the way he carries himself. Super just calm, cool, collected, and just kind of seems happy to be here. Like when you talk to him, it's just like this is his dream to play for LSU, and he's just having fun.
Very laid back.
Very laid back. And I think that when people see that, like you're like, well, I want a guy that goes after him. I think he flips a switch on the mound. Like I think that is very much a thing of where he attacks. Ianson attacked the other day. And obviously Shores did today and the rest of the bullpen. But, man, I don't know. I mean, you can stay on Cade Anderson. We can talk about Ianson or some of the other freshmen. However you want to take this. You want to just go starters first?
Well, we can go starters first for sure because you had a chance to see Ianson on Saturday in person. I was watching from at home. I thought just on the TV, man, you get a little bit of a different viewpoint of watching every pitch on the TV as opposed to being behind home plate and watching it from above in the press box. But his curveball really has some nice movement on it. His fastball has a little bit of run, got up to 96, I believe, on several occasions. It didn't maybe seem as easy at times for Ianson as it was maybe for Anderson on Friday and Shores on Sunday. I can talk a little bit more about Shores, but just what were your thoughts on Anthony Ianson and what he looked like in his debut start for LSU?
Yeah, I think one of the words you could use is he was just competitive. Like he never seemed to lose the rope, if that makes sense. In certain situations, yes, he faced adversity, which I asked Jay as he was walking out, and I don't think it made it on the audio for a lot of people because he's walking out. And I said, "Would you rather have an outing where a guy like Ianson faces second and third 1-out situations where you get to see how he flourishes?" He goes, "Oh, of course." He said, like, beating people 14-0 doesn't, or 14-1 or 10-1 doesn't really do anything for you. Like you don't get to learn as much. And we've heard him talk about that, over the past couple of seasons. But I think seeing Ianson in those situations gives you a little bit of an inkling of what would it look like when you ramp it up 100, then you're at a Friday night at the box or Saturday night at the box, or you're on the road, at Texas A&M or something like that. So when you kind of get into that aspect, I thought he was competitive. You mentioned the breaking ball too. I mean, that we were Koki Riley and I were in the press box like that thing floats, like it kind of just whiffles, like it's pretty nasty. And I don't think his fastball's overpowering necessarily. I don't think it'll be overpowering in SEC play, but like you kind of mentioned, Cade Anderson's not overpowering, but when you set up well with the off speed, that thing really starts to pop out of the hand. And so 93, 94, if you're locating the 76, 78 mile per hour curve, slider, whatever you want to throw, you're locating a changeup. I mean, as well as I do, Glenn, 93, 94 starts to feel more like 96, 97. It gets up on you. So I thought he competed pretty well. Like you said, it wasn't easy going. I think Jay Johnson mentioned and talked about that. And then another thing Johnson talked about was, when they went back and recruited him, and I thought it was kind of cool to hear that story. It was just like one of those guys that you feel like you had to have. Right mentality, right, goes about it the right way on the mound. And I mean, this pitching staff through 3 games is pretty impressive. So if you're getting a start on a weekend, you must have something that Jay likes and really likes about you. I just thought he competed, Glenn. I mean, I don't think there's anything necessarily to, run to the hot off the press that Anthony Ionson's going to be the number 1 overall pick or anything like that. But I think he's a guy who's got plus stuff. And as long as everything stays in line, like you mentioned with that breaking ball, he can feed off the fastball. He told me, he said that he actually throughout his career throws percentage-wise about the same, which is not typical really with kind of a Coach Yeski approach in terms of wanting to attack with the heater. But they've kind of catered to him like what he feels comfortable with. And I thought he competed, and obviously solid, I think, efficient outing. It wasn't anything to go crazy about. But also nothing to be like, okay, should he be in there when you look at what everyone else did? I was impressed. I'm ready to see what it looks like 3, 4, 5 starts down the road, especially when they, go out to Frisco or they play in some of these SEC games, what it kind of looks like against those guys.
Yeah, I think that's the argument you can make for a lot of this, right? Is
Yeah.
that, until we start to see some stiffer competition, it's going to be a little bit of a, incomplete grade, I guess, in
Yeah.
that respect, just because, we want to see it against some stiffer competition. But yeah, good start for him. I got a chance to see Chase Shores on Sunday. And I mean, this is a guy who's missed 22 months of baseball. He hadn't been able to pick up a baseball and play in a competitive game in over 22 months. And I thought there was really no rust on him at all. I mean,
Yeah.
I know there had been some reports out there, and I had certainly seen him a few times, and he was working through some of that. He talked about that with us on Sunday after his outing, that he was really kind of, there were some up and down moments for him in the fall, and even in this last, month stretch here leading into the season, where he was a little bit erratic with his command and trying to lock in on that. I did not see that at all on Sunday. I thought he was exemplary in his 5 innings. He throws 67 pitches in 5 innings, 44 for strikes, struck out 7, didn't walk any, allowed 3 hits and 1 run, which came in the first inning. And really what I think stood out to me, though, is he was throwing a lot of heaters in that first inning, a lot of 97, 98 mile an hour fastballs. But when he worked in the 85 mile an hour slider in the second, third, fourth, fifth innings,
Yeah.
Purdue Fort Wayne had no shot. They had no chance at hitting him, and they didn't. Like, I think he went, he struck out the side in the fourth. I think he went 3 up, 3 down in the fifth as well, and just was really steady throughout the majority of his outing, and really a good thing to see, especially if you're an LSU baseball fan who knows his story and knows what happened to him 2 years ago and throwing out his arm against Tennessee in one of the biggest games of the season. And, he's going to be, I mean, I think in terms of ceiling, there's probably not a pitcher on this staff that has a higher ceiling than Chase Shores when he is putting it all together. I mean, he's a dynamic, electric, high throwing velocity pitcher, and you don't get a whole lot of those guys that come to campus every day. And so I think a big part of what you've heard from Jay Johnson the last 2 years is, man, if we'd had this guy in 2024 fully healthy, if we'd had him in 2023, yes, we still probably would have won the championship, but it probably would have been a little bit even easier for us if we'd had him. So it was really good to see Chase out there, letting it loose and just playing with some confidence, and didn't really look like he had much struggles out there, kind of battling the debut emotions that I think could certainly crop up on a player after missing that much time. So really positive marks across the way for all 3 of these starters. And that can kind of take us into, what we're looking at here with the bullpen. And I thought that for me, the bullpen, it starts with these 4 freshmen. Like, I mean, what they were able to do with, Kason Evans and Cooper Williams leading it off on Friday, Maverick Rizzi closing the game out on Saturday, and then William Schmidt going 2 2/3 on Sunday. Just really electric stuff. I mean, the first 3 guys, Kason Evans, Maverick Rizzi, and Cooper Williams, they faced the order. Like, I mean, they did not allow a base runner. They struck out, I believe, 9 guys between the 3 of them. They were just super consistent, hard throwing strikes from Kason Evans. I think his fastball got up to 98 on the gun, maybe even 99 a couple times in his 2 innings, mixed in a nice slider as well. He's somebody that I think just has immense potential in this lineup, and he's going to be able to pitch against SEC guys if he's able to continue to show that he has the command to do so. Cooper Williams from the left side, they don't have many left-handed pitchers, so I would imagine that he's a guy that LSU uses pretty consistently on weekends, and particular kind of just in terms of matchups and getting a couple innings or a couple outs here and there. And then Maverick Rizzi, I mean, you got a chance to see Maverick. I mean, just 1 inning of work, but Fastball was up to 97.
And
Just
it moves. Like,
blew
that's what's ridiculous.
blew guys away. I mean, he struck out the side if I'm not correct, and then Schmidt obviously coming home on Sunday with 2 2/3. I think he struck out 3 or 4 guys, allowed just 1 hit, and he faced only 9 batters. 23 of his 32 pitches were for strikes. So just an absolute masterclass performance, I think, from this freshman pitching staff. And honestly, there are 4 guys that, like, if there's ever any kind of shuffling of what happens with the rotation, whether it be a starter moving in and out, like, they could see their roles continue to uptick here. They could make it really, really hard on this pitching staff and on Jay Johnson and Nate Yeske to keep them out of serious innings. And that was probably my biggest takeaway outside of just the total dominance of the series, was just how comfortable these freshman pitchers looked. Was there anything that kind of caught your eye in that respect, of just maybe one outlier or one thing that stood apart from just the overall consistency from the series from this team?
Yeah, I mean, I think just you kind of hit on it a little bit, but just when you look at what they're going to be able to do, and obviously, like you said, we got to take all this with a grain of salt, right? Because
Sure.
I mean, it looks awesome. We're sky high here on February 16th, thinking, okay, all right, this. I mean, it does play. Like, what plays for pitchers? Throwing strikes, and Glenn, that's what they did. Like, there weren't a lot of wasted pitches. Everything seemed very intentional about how you wanted to set up a batter. And I'll be honest with you, like, I mean, I know you've covered LSU for a long time. I've covered LSU for a little bit. I've called games elsewhere, in the college baseball world. I don't recall this early in the season seeing pitching just be that dialed in with the plan and the purpose. Like, I think that's something that, look, if you don't take anything else away from this podcast, I think that you can understand, and you say, okay, those guys are kind of, they're homers or whatever. Well, just pay attention to the fact that these guys went out there and threw strikes, and that will play whether you're playing in College Station or you're playing at Purdue Fort Wayne. Like, I don't care where you're playing the game, that will play. Now, can you throw strikes consistently in the bigger moments? We will obviously see. But Jay did say that, and he included a bunch of other guys in this, but we were talking about Maverick Rizzi on Saturday postgame. He said, he, along with a bunch of other guys, those are type of guys that will be pitching in big spots for us. Like, he anticipates that. And Jay is such a, in my opinion, like, I don't know how you view it, as kind of cards close to the vest a little bit on certain things, but how real he has been about this and their ability to, like, hey, they're going to be guys for us. Like, they're not in here to just, sit on the edge of the bench or the end of the dugout or the end of the, bullpen and just kind of watch. Like, these guys are going to be pitching for us. And I think you saw that. Like you mentioned when we started the pod off, a lot of the names that we might have thought that we're going to pitch this weekend aren't. Now, you do have 2 midweek games combined with the series, so that plays into it a little bit. I don't know, Glenn. I just, throwing strikes. I mean, how many times do we go on the message board and see, if we can't throw strikes, it doesn't matter. And you're right, like 110% right. If that was my biggest takeaway, is like, they're pounding the zone. Like, you know what? And your stuff's good enough too, when you look at it, like, how many guys in the non-conference portion are really going to be able to make you pay when you leave 97 over the heart of the plate? Like, just being truthful. Like, I don't, when you play the bigger schools, okay, it's a whole different conversation. But when you play the Purdue, Fort Wayne's, Omaha, Southern, Nicholls State you have coming up, how many guys 1 through 9 are going to be able to make you pay for that? So right now, I'd much rather see this group throwing strikes, maybe giving up some contact here or there, than 4.5-hour games because there's 12 walks on each side, type of things.
Yeah, I agree completely. I thought the main takeaway here was that they were throwing strikes and that they were getting outs. I mean, there were not, I believe, between the 3 games defensively, LSU had 1 error. I mean, I'm looking here right now through the stats. They had 1 error on Friday. They had no errors on Sunday, and they had 1 error on Saturday too. So they had 2 errors throughout the entirety of the weekend, which is also another really positive sign when you have guys making plays and holding up defensively. So I do kind of want to touch on the offense for a minute.
Yes.
Like, I think, look, I mean, they were facing 76 to 83 for most of this weekend.
No disrespect to the kid on Saturday. The Joker was throwing, he's lefty. He was literally throwing like 83. And, it's like, I wanted people to understand the biggest example, and I put on the board of this, was when Chris Stanfield with the bases loaded grounded the double play. If you go back and watch, he literally hit it off the end of the bat because he's so far out in front of it. And
Yeah.
credit to that kid. Like when you're facing in what they're facing, 91, 92, 93, 94, and you got a kid out there throwing, my dad used to say this, 80 poo, out there. It is what it is. So to your point, yeah, you're facing something you're not going to see a lot of.
And look, yeah, I mean, we just spent 20 minutes just hyping up this pitching staff and showing and telling them how great they are. And they were throwing 96, 97. Everybody was throwing just absolute gas. And, the hitters were facing that for the last 7 months. The hitters were back into the fall going up against these guys, and so they were facing those strong arm pitchers. And so it might have taken a couple of innings to adjust to what they were seeing. And to their point, they did that on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
They put up double-digit runs on both Friday and Saturday. They had 8 here on the Sunday game. The pitcher that they threw out on Sunday, Purdue-Fort Wayne, was hitting 90, 91 for a little bit of the game. He was definitely their higher throwing pitcher that we saw all weekend. And honestly, I put this on one of our text chains on the message boards. I put the the GIF of the it's a trap, from Star Wars, the whatever the fish looking thing is from Star Wars. And because I was like, they're tricking them. They're throwing their hardest guy on Sunday, and they're trying to get him out of their plan. So, but no, it took LSU maybe 3 or 4 innings to get, find that zone. And I think they put up 5 runs in the 4th, 2 runs in the 5th, another couple in the 7th, and or in the 6th, and they were kind of off and running from there. So they did a really nice job of adjusting to whether it was a 90-mile-an-hour fastball or just figuring it out with the 83-mile-per-hour fastball on Saturday. But I think probably the biggest takeaway that you can have is that they were disciplined at the plate. Like, I mean, the plate discipline was there. I think they had 30 free passes that they accumulated over the 3 games between walks and hit by pitches. And so, I mean, they were out in front of maybe a few on Saturday. I think on Friday they came out guns a-blazing and were able to get off to a really fast start on Friday in the opener. But, look, they proved that they can win games without the long ball, and they proved on Saturday they can win it with the long ball, and then they proved on Sunday that they can do it with a little bit of both. And they were a little bit more small ball, I think, at times on the Sunday game, and were trying to generate runs and in that fashion. But they had a couple of big knocks from Ashton Larson, who had a 3-run homer, and there were a bunch of different guys that stood out from the weekend. I thought Derek Curiel, the freshman, had a really nice consistent weekend. Very much of what we had seen in the fall and into the spring here. Chris Stanfield, I thought, did a really nice job in the leadoff spot. You had some really good at bats from Josh Pearson in the first couple of games as well. He's just a guy that I think LSU is going to want out there in some of the more important games of the year. Like, I don't see him not being a part of that core 9 when it's all said and done. So, there are a lot of good takeaways you can have offensively, maybe not to the degree that you can from the pitching staff, just because you're not going to be facing this kind of pitching every week. So you got to see if it can translate over to some of the higher throwing teams from a velocity standpoint. But anything offensively that kind of caught your eye that you wanted to mention here quickly?
Once again, like a grain of salt, but I think just showing that you can produce in different ways, right? Like Friday, didn't hit a home run. Saturday, Bear Jones put a dent in the scoreboard, type of thing. Gurriel had the home run. And then, so I think winning in different ways is something that is just something you want to establish early on as a team. And like I said, just 3 games, take it with a grain of salt, but that could be something to monitor going forward. And then the last part, man, I think I tweeted this 4 times. I think I put on the message board 3 different times. Daniel Dickinson is just a ball player. And I look, I don't know what type of draft style. I don't know, but I'm telling you, he's the kind of guy that GMs, front office people love, and you can see why LSU loved him, because he just plays ball. Like, and I'm not even meaning to be like an elitist in this. If you don't know what that means, ask someone who knows baseball. It's just one of those guys that just does everything, and he can hit, he can field, he plays 110%, and I think someone made the joke, he's the kind of guy that gets out of the ballpark and he's already got dirt on his uniform somehow, and he hadn't even done anything. Like, it's just one of those things. And so I just love what he could be. And then just to not get too much into the weeds here, Glenn, but I did want to ask you this because I think that you saw, we'll call it the seeds being planted. Nothing's ready to harvest yet, hopefully until the in Omaha in June. But you saw what the protection around Jared Jones could look like. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that's really has to be something. We didn't talk about that in the preview last week, but I think that's something that has to happen for this group to have success. I mean, we saw when you didn't have that last year necessarily at times, if Tommy White was struggling, which he did at times, other teams knew that, and SEC teams will know that. And so, look, Daniel Dickinson currently batting over whatever he's batting, against Purdue, Fort Wayne. You got to see what happens.
556 through 3 games.
I mean, let's give him a break. It did drop down from 714 before the game, so that is something we'll have to monitor. No, but in all seriousness, just the protection around him. I mean, I think that's something where another storyline to monitor through the non-conference portion of the schedule is what is it the lineup? How does that end up shaking out? Because I love the combo of, honestly, Stanfield, Curiel, Jared. Like, I just think that is a really nice 1, 2, 3, and then if you can get Daniel Dickinson in there around there, Josh Pearson, and other guys as they get more comfortable, yeah, Jared Jones is going to be able to see some good pitches this year.
Yeah, it's a good one. Like, I mean, Jared Jones walked 5 times this weekend, didn't strike out at all. He got his bat on one really good long ball there in the Saturday game, but you mentioned it there. 3 different guys were, behind him in the order on each of these 3 games. It was Josh Pearson, then it was Daniel Dickinson, and today it was Jake Brown who was batting behind Jared Jones in that 4-hole. So there's a lot of different ways to continue to go. Like I think Dickinson's a good candidate to maybe have that spot long term. But Josh Pearson is just a pro's pro. He's going to get on base. He's not going to do anything flashy for the most part, but he'll take really strong at bats and get on base. And then another one that I think we should point out, who just might make it really impossible not to have in the lineup, is Ashton Larson. I mean, he did not start in either of the first 2 games, and he comes back here as a starter on Sunday, and he goes 3 for 5 with 5 RBIs, a home run, an RBI double that scored 2 runs. Like he
had a 2 RBI single on Saturday in a pinch hitting situation.
Yeah. So I mean, he's not the fastest outfielder. He's not the quickest base runner on the team. He probably could use some more work on his glove even, but he's a hitter, man. He can absolutely hit and do it consistently in a way that I think it's going to keep he's going to make it very difficult on what Jay Johnson wants to do, because as that outfield kind of settles, I think we're both in agreement that Stanfield and Curiel are kind of
have to be there. Yeah.
They're boxed in, they're penciled in right now, and probably pretty close to changing that to some red pen. But I think that, that other outfield spot and kind of how that plays off of the DH role, you're looking at Josh Pearson, Jake Brown, and Ashton Larson. One of those guys can't play in the start, or at least start the game. And you saw LSU trot out a number of different combinations this weekend. All 3 of them got some playing time, and I'll just be very interested to see which ones can kind of carry the momentum forward and have a really good non-conference play.
Just non-conference, but man, it felt good to be watching some LSU baseball. Great crowds and a weird weather weekend too, but I guess that's just South Louisiana.
Cold and windy, hot and muggy, and then cold and windy again on Sunday. It was
crazy.
It was weird.
And then, so LSU plays Tuesday against Southern, Wednesday at Nichols. The weather on Tuesday, I don't know if you've looked at this. It's like a high of 51. So, it's going to be.
It's a 2:00 game though on Tuesday, so it'll be
2:00 game on Tuesday. The boys will be freezing down in Thibodeau. That is for sure. It's going to be like a high of 45. And then this weekend, obviously, I believe it's Omaha, if I'm correct. They're playing Omaha. So, great stuff. Going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you check in with us all season long for LSU baseball coverage and more. Big win for the boys out in Norman, Oklahoma. Glenn, let's give a hand clap to Matt McMahon and the crew. Needed it.
Shout out Cam Carter, man. That dude was lights out in the final 6 minutes of that game.
He was locked.
Took it over.
Locked in. LSU softball undefeated, knocked off, already has 4 top 25 wins. And also, seriously, if you don't pay attention to softball, it's really predicated on pitching. LSU might have something this year. Like, they've got some serious pitching in the circle there as well. The women fall, tough loss today at Texas, the women's basketball team. So a lot of great stuff happening. And Glenn, we hadn't even touched on LSU football, spring football, literally we're 3 weeks away from the first
Yeah,
spring practice.
3 weeks away from the
And,
first practice. We got O-line commit that just jumped on board in the 2026 class,
yeah,
Bryce
why not?
Martinez. So you don't have to go far for information and news from LSU, even in the off season. So yeah, we'll keep things keep you guys posted and all that stuff. But right now, just really good to get back into baseball season, and look forward to another hopefully long run here.
That's going to be awesome. Well, my 8-month-old daughter is starting to get a little restless, so I think it's time for us to hit end recording on the podcast.
Good.
We appreciate everyone for tuning in. Make sure you lock in that subscription. Just subscribe to the podcast, completely free for you to do, and come hang out with us on the Go 24/7 boards there as well. He is Glen West. My name is Bryce Koon, and we'll catch you next time here on the Go 24/7 podcast.